Hi, I'm Emma. My life with James is everything I could have dreamed of. He's the kind of man who can fix anything with an engine and make you laugh while doing it. We met 5 years ago when my car broke down, and I still tease him about using that as his pickup line. As a mechanic, he's built a stellar reputation in our community, and I couldn't be prouder to call him my husband. Last spring, I was focused on building my photography business, specializing in corporate events and professional headshots. I had just finished setting up my new studio when Sarah, my sister, dropped by unannounced. She wore the kind of smile that always felt more like a challenge than a greeting. "Oh, sweetie," she cooed, her tone dripping with condescension. "Still playing with your little camera? I thought you'd have grown out of that hobby by now." "It's not a hobby, Sarah," I replied, forcing myself to stay calm. "I just landed the Thompson Industries account." Her eyes widened briefly before she masked her reaction. "Really? How interesting." Marcus and I were just talking about how vital image is in the professional world. I should have known she was plotting something. A week later, my biggest potential client canceled their contract without explanation. Pamela, my best friend since college and an HR manager at Thompson Industries, filled in the blanks. "Your sister," Pamela said, her voice brimming with anger, contacted our marketing team. She raised ethical concerns about hiring family members for professional services and even showed them some amateur photos claiming they were your work. I gripped my coffee mug tightly, my hands shaking. "She did what?" "That's not all," Pamela added grimly. "She suggested they hire Maria instead, her friend who just started dabbling in photography." My stomach turned. Sarah had always been competitive, but this was deliberate, calculated sabotage. That night, James found me in my home office, crying as I stared at my empty booking calendar. "Hey, engine of my life," he said gently, using his cheesy nickname for me. "Talk to me." I poured out the whole story, and James listened intently. Then, without hesitation, he pulled out his phone and started making calls. Tom, his mentor at the auto shop, turned out to be golf buddies with the CEO of Thompson Industries. By the end of the week, not only was my contract reinstated, but they doubled the number of events they wanted me to cover. Pamela spread the word about Sarah's underhanded tactics in professional circles. "Your sister doesn't realize how small the corporate world really is," she told me over lunch. People talk. The final blow to Sarah's scheme came when Maria visited my studio to apologize. "I had no idea she was using me to hurt you," Maria confessed, showing me the messages Sarah had sent her. They detailed the entire plan to undermine my business. That evening, James came home with 3 new client contracts for me. "Turns out, mechanics know a lot of business owners who need good photographers," he said with a wink. "Some of my regulars were pretty excited when I mentioned your work." I hugged him tightly, overwhelmed with gratitude. With James's connections and Pamela's support, my business began to thrive again. That night, we celebrated with takeout from our favorite Chinese restaurant. For the first time in weeks, I felt a deep sense of peace and appreciation for the people who had my back. 2 weeks later, at our annual family reunion, the tension with Sarah resurfaced. She and her husband, Dr. Marcus, arrived in a brand new Mercedes, making sure everyone noticed. "Marcus just made partner at the hospital," Sarah announced during dinner, barely touching her food. "We're thinking of buying a vacation home in the Hamptons. You know how important the right connections are." Our cousin Amy, always kind and genuine, turned to James. "How's work going? I heard you were promoted recently." Before James could answer, Sarah cut in with a smirk. "Oh, you're still at that garage? I thought you'd have moved on to something more professional by now. Marcus knows some people in hospital administration. Maybe he could help you find a real career." The table went silent. I watched James's knuckles whiten around his fork, but his voice remained steady. "I appreciate the offer, Sarah, but I love what I do," James replied evenly, his calm voice cutting through the tension. "Being a mechanic is a perfectly respectable career." Before Sarah could retort, Tom, James's mentor and a father figure to him, spoke up from across the table. "James just saved the city bus company $50,000 by fixing a problem their so-called specialists couldn't figure out." Sarah rolled her eyes dramatically. "How fascinating. Speaking of transportation, Marcus, didn't you just get a call about a speaking engagement in Europe?" Dr. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Actually, I had to decline. The timing wasn't right." "What do you mean you had to decline?" Sarah's voice rose sharply. Sarah, perhaps we should discuss this later, Marcus muttered, loosening his tie. The conversation eventually moved on, though I couldn't help but notice Marcus checking his phone repeatedly, his expression growing more concerned with each glance. After dessert, Sarah announced they needed to leave early. Marcus has an important meeting tomorrow, she explained, fishing for her car keys. Some of us have real responsibilities. As they drove off, the sound of their Mercedes making a horrible grinding noise stopped everyone mid-conversation. Moments later, it rolled to a halt halfway down the driveway. "This is ridiculous." Sarah's voice carried back to the house. "Marcus, call our dealer right now." "They're closed, Sarah. It's Sunday evening." "Well, we can't just stand here. Call a tow truck or something." From the porch, James exchanged a knowing glance with Tom, but said nothing. Sarah's complaints echoed in the gathering darkness until James finally called out, "Need a ride home?" He wiped his hands on a napkin and strolled toward them. "I can have someone from the shop look at your car first thing tomorrow." "We are not letting some grease monkey touch our Mercedes," Sarah snapped. "We'll wait for professional service. Thank you very much." Pamela, who'd been watching the scene unfold, leaned over and whispered to me, "Karma works fast these days." We left them waiting in the driveway, Sarah's voice growing shriller by the minute as she argued with Marcus about whose fault it was that they'd skipped the car's last scheduled maintenance. Monday morning, the unexpected call came from Marcus himself. "Listen, James, about the car. The dealership can't look at it until next week. I have critical patient appointments and Sarah's furious. I hate to ask, but—" "I'll take care of it," James interrupted, his voice neutral. "Have it towed to the shop." An hour later, Sarah stormed into Tom's auto shop as though she owned the place. "This is completely unacceptable. Do you even know how much this car costs?" "More than you can afford, apparently," Maria chimed in from the waiting area. She'd brought her own car in for service and was watching the scene unfold with amusement. James emerged from under the Mercedes, wiping his hands and holding a tablet. "Your transmission has major issues and your brake lines are severely corroded. When's the last time you had it serviced?" "That's impossible." Sarah scoffed. "Marcus handles all that." "Actually," Marcus stepped forward hesitantly, "I've been meaning to tell you. We've had to postpone some maintenance. The hospital's been making cuts, and with the new house payments—" "What are you talking about?" Sarah's voice was incredulous. "You're a doctor. You're a partner at the hospital." "Not exactly," Marcus admitted, loosening his tie again. "I was passed over for partner. The speaking engagement in Europe? It was a job interview. Sarah, we're in trouble." The color drained from Sarah's face. "This is ridiculous. We'll just buy a new car." "With what money?" Marcus's voice cracked. "We're already maxed out. The house is mortgaged to the limit. You're spending." "Don't you dare blame this on me," she snapped, turning on James. "This is probably some scam. He's just a mechanic. What does he know about luxury cars?" Tom stepped out of his office, arms crossed. "James is certified for high-end European vehicles. He's one of only 3 mechanics in the state with a specific Mercedes certification. But if you don't want our help—" Sarah froze. Maria chimed in. "The hospital board members bring their cars here. That's how I found this place. Dr. Patterson was just saying last week how impressed he was with James's work on his Porsche." Marcus grabbed James's arm. "Can you fix it? I have surgery scheduled. I can't lose any more credibility with the board." "Parts will be expensive," James said calmly, "and it'll take a few days to do it right." "Just do what you have to do," Marcus replied, handing over his credit card and ignoring Sarah's protests. Sarah stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Every eye in the waiting room was on her, including several people she recognized from her social circle. "I'll wait in the car," she muttered. "Good luck with that," Maria called after her. "It's not going anywhere." Over the next 3 days, James worked overtime on the Mercedes, meticulously repairing years of neglect. "The car is just a symptom," James explained, showing me the extent of the damage. "They've been living on appearances. Marcus is a good doctor, but Sarah pushed them into a lifestyle they couldn't afford." Word spread quickly through the hospital's social circle. Pamela called to tell me Sarah had been notably absent from the weekly charity committee meeting. "Everyone's talking about how she lied about Marcus being made partner. The board members' wives are furious," she said. Later, Maria stopped by my studio with an update. Sarah's been calling everyone, trying to do damage control. But you know what? People are more impressed by how James and Marcus handled everything. Dr. Patterson even asked me to pass his card to James. The hospital is looking for a new service contract for their ambulance fleet. The following week, Sarah showed up at our house alone. She looked different. No designer handbag, no meticulously styled hair. She sat stiffly on the couch, her posture as rigid as her expression. "I suppose you're happy now," she said, her voice bitter. "Everything's falling apart. Marcus insists we sell the house, says we need to live within our means. The hospital wives won't even return my calls." "That's not my fault, Sarah." "No, it's not," she admitted, twisting her wedding ring nervously. "Marcus showed me the repair bill. James charged less than the dealership would have. He did good work." Her voice softened, but only for a moment. "I'm not apologizing," she added quickly. I need a favor. The charity committee is organizing the hospital's annual fundraiser, and they need a photographer." "My schedule is fully booked," I replied, keeping my tone polite. "I just hired an assistant to help with all the new corporate contracts. But I heard Maria's available." Sarah stood, smoothing down her off-the-rack dress. "Right. Of course, I should go." I watched her walk to her car, now an ordinary Toyota, and drive away. Moments later, James pulled into the driveway in his work truck, the hospital's new service contract logo freshly painted on the side. "Tom's letting me manage the hospital account," he grinned. "We're hiring 2 more mechanics to handle the workload." That evening, Pamela and Maria came over to celebrate. We sat in the backyard, enjoying the simple pleasure of good friends and takeout pizza. "Did you hear?" Pamela asked, taking a sip of her drink. "Marcus finally stood up to Sarah. He's taking that position in Europe, said they need a fresh start. Sarah has to either go with him and live on a regular doctor's salary or stay here on her own." "Sometimes people create their own karma," Maria mused. "All you have to do is let them." James squeezed my hand as we watched the sunset. We didn't need expensive cars or vacation homes. We had something far better: respect, honest work, and people who genuinely cared about us. In the end, that's what truly matters. Have you ever dealt with someone who looked down on your profession or life choices? How did you handle it? Share your stories in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you stood your ground and stayed true to yourself. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one.